this is an actual win-in match for both of these players. Bob normally would have been able to draw in, but he got paired down against Ming, who's 11-2-1, so they had to battle. Now Ming's going to start out with an expedition. I believe that's an overgrown tomb, but don't quote me on that. I don't have the expedition arts memorized yet.
Yeah, I do not either.
He's going to Inquisition Bob Huang, who has a bunch of glare on his card. So we see there's a Night's Whisper, a Goryo's Vengeance, a couple of lands, and a Desperate Ritual is what it appeared. And he's going to take the Night's Whisper out of his hand.
Yeah, it looks like Ming Wen is just valuing the ability to ensure that Bob doesn't see more cards. He wants him to be limited to his natural draw steps, essentially.
So it looks like that one is the Godless Shrine art. And we're going to have another discard spell here. And again, all the glare. Looks like we've got a Desperate Ritual, Night's Whisper.
Goryo's Vengeance?
Yeah, he just drew a Night's Whisper. You get discard the Night's Whisper, draw the Night's Whisper.
Yeah, so this is a little interesting that I wonder what changed in Ming Wen's draw step. He made Bob discard a Night's Whisper first, but then made him discard a Goryo's Vengeance, even though a new white Night's Whisper had been drawn, and the Goryo's Vengeance was there from the beginning.
Yeah, I'm not sure. I can't think of something that would have changed that. Now, it looks like he does have a Damnation, a Kitchen Finks, and a couple of lands in his hand, but he is just going to go ahead and play Stern Wildwood and pass. And Bob Huang is going to use a fetch land here on his turn, and I have to imagine we're going to see a Night's Whisper get cast that Ming Wen left in his hand.
So you said Ming had a Damnation in his hand, and that really kind of shows not only that Ming probably doesn't have enough good interaction for the matchup, but also because this Goryo's Vengeance deck is such a fringe deck that Ming may not even completely understand exactly what's going on, because basically the way Bob's deck is going to work, none of his creatures are really going to live very long. He's going to be Goryo's Vengeancing or
Through the Breach.
Yeah, Through the Breach them, and then he's just going to kill him that turn. So the Damnation seems a little out of place.
Yeah, really the only time that I can expect that Damnation will get any value is if Bob just has to put a Worldspine Warnum on the battlefield. It can't attack, and then it dies and leaves behind some 5/5s. And then Ming can go ahead and get those with the Dismember or with the Damnation, but that is just so infrequently to happen.
Yeah, that is a corner case scenario. But again, these mid-range decks, the Abzans, the Juns, they just don't have that much good interaction for this matchup. So having something that may be useful even in a corner case scenario might be worth it.
So it looks like we do have some Fulminator Mage in Ming's deck, similar to what you suggested that the Jund opponent should have sideboarded against Bob earlier on in the day. Ming is going to go ahead and crack his Marsh Flats. He's going to find a Plains, and from here, let's go ahead and see what he does.
Yeah, did you say that he had a Fulminator Mage in his hand?
Not in his hand, I saw some in his deck.
Oh, okay, sweet. Yeah, it seems like if he had a Fulminator Mage in his hand, he would have wanted to get a different land.
So it looks like here we're just going to play a Kitchen Finks and pass the turn back to Bob.
Yeah, and this Kitchen Finks is not much of a clock. Bob is still at 16. He's got plenty of life to work with. He can even cast a few more Night's Whispers without really having to worry too much. And these things are really hard to slog through. The Abzan deck, its main form of disruption, is going to be a little bit of land destruction potentially with some discard. And the best way to combat those things are to just draw extra cards.
Now it looks like Bob has a Simian Spirit Guide and a Desperate Ritual in his hand. So he really isn't too many pieces away from being able to do some broken things.
Yeah, definitely a scary place for Ming, but this is not what Ming expected to face when he came today.
I can't imagine.
Yeah, if Ming expected to face Goryo's Vengeance, he would have played a different deck.
I believe. Now, is there anything for those players out there that are just can't get off these Abzan or Jund decks? Is there anything that they can play in their sideboard that could potentially help them against Goryo's Vengeance?
Well, it's a little tricky. If the Goryo's Vengeance decks are going to be this 3-color variety, the land destruction plan may become a little better, but even still it's not going to be that great simply because Bob has the potential of comboing off with very little mana. You can do things like Surgical Extraction. If you make them discard a Griselbrand and then you can Surgical it, that could be a potential avenue to victory. But generally speaking, the main issue is that it's so hard to have good sideboard cards for every single match in the format, and since this Goryo's Vengeance deck is not particularly popular, I would probably just kind of ignore it and not really have sideboard cards until it does become more popular.
Fair. Now, speaking of Fulminator Mage, it appears that Ming Wen has drawn a Fulminator Mage for his turn. Unfortunately, the lands that are in his hand are 4 Shambling Vent, so because he didn't fetch a land that would allow him to cast Fulminator Mage if he drew one with that Marsh Flats, it just has to sit in his hand for a turn and give Bob access to all of his mana.
Yeah, certainly not the best line of play, but he'll just have to make do with it, and at least he has the option to cast it next turn.
Now, what is kind of interesting there is Bob could have fetched and cast his Serum Visions last turn, but decided not to and just wanted to wait a turn. Now, he's going to draw a land off the Serum Visions and see 2 Borborygmos Enraged on this scry. Now, he is going to need one of those more than likely to win this game, so he has to decide where he wants to put them because there's only 2 in his deck. So if they both go on the bottom, he's going to have to draw through his entire deck unless he has a way to shuffle it while he's comboing off.
Yeah, I mean, we saw last game, though, that Bob literally drew his entire deck. He even made a little hand motion, patting the table where the deck should have been, and there was just nothing there. So I think Bob is, completely fine with that. And given the fact that there's not a whole lot of pressure, Bob's not going to be in a situation where he has to combo off on the following turn. So he probably is juggling this just right.
So we see another Serum Visions here from Bob. He's drawn a card. It was a Faithless Looting, and now he's looking at his scry, deciding on where he wants to put the cards. I have to imagine he might pop off that Faithless Looting here this turn, or he might even wait till next turn to see if he can draw into something that he's a little more likely to want to discard.
So while Bob is not under a whole lot of pressure, that Kitchen Finks doesn't look like a whole lot, one avenue of attack that is available to Ming is he can animate one of his man lands and attack with it and the Kitchen Finks and essentially put Bob on a 2-turn clock. The only thing that would be bad about that is Ming wouldn't be able to attack with anything else, wouldn't be able to deploy any other threats on his turn. So Bob might actually be trying to set himself up for a combo on the following turn.
So it looks like he put both cards back on top, which were Worldspine Worm and Painful Truths. And if Ming Wen fires up this Stirring Wildwood next turn and gets into the battlefield for 6, Bob just might not have time to actually utilize that Painful Truths that he put back on top of his deck from the scry.
Yeah, I think he has a Nourishing Shoal in his hand. So if he casts the Nourishing Shoal, he'll not only buy himself some time, but he might be able to do some of the splice to arcane shenanigans that we had seen earlier.
I see. So I can imagine in the next turn Bob is planning on casting his Nourishing Shoal, maybe even splicing some Desperate Rituals onto it to try and gain some mana. But at the very least, he's going to gain a bunch of life and buffer for a few turns against Ming Wen's Abzan deck.
Yeah, and this could be particularly interesting because if Ming Wen thinks that he has Bob Huang on a 2-turn clock by animating his manlands, he may essentially be baited into using up all of his mana in an inefficient way.
So here we see a Fulminator Mage instead of activating one of his creature lands to try and put Bob on a 2-turn clock, whereas this is effectively going to do the same.
Yeah, this is a great line of play from Ming. This puts a lot of pressure on the board, provides a little bit of disruption. I still think that Bob is going to be able to carry things through the day so long as he has a Fatty and a Nourishing Shoal, but if he is missing one of those things, he may be running out of time.
So it looks like this Tarmogoyf is going to be a 4/5, so 7. So he's going to be able to do 10 damage next turn if he needs to. Bob is going to be able to gain a bunch of life, though, with that Nourishing Shoal if he were to get rid of one of these Worldspine Worms, and that's going to put him out of lethal range for next turn and give him another turn to try and draw into something.
Yeah, even with the Painful Truth in his hand, normally you would think if I have no board, a Painful Truth in my hand, I can't cast it when I'm at 7 life, staring down Tarmogoyf, Kitchen Finks, Shambling Vent, but with that Nourishing Shoal, Bob Huang can kind of do things that, really aren't quite fair. I mean, he has the potential to just draw 3 cards, gain a bunch of life, and maybe even do more than that.
Let's see here. So it looks like Bob has a lot of cards in his hand. He has a lot of different options. So he's going to flashback Faithless Looting.
Looks like another Nourishing Shoal and a Through the Breach. So if he has 2 fatties, this could be really good. I'm not sure if he has any, though.
He does have at least 1 Worldspine Worm. We have a couple Nourishing Shoals. So he is at the very least going to be able to gain some life here.
Yeah, I think he was really looking to find another fatty, though. If he could gain a bunch of life and through the breach something into play, he could really catapult himself ahead.
Here, so Bob is going to go ahead and discard 2 cards off of his Faithless Loading Flashback. Again, he is at 12-2. Ming Wen is 11-2-1 on Abzan. The winner of this match will make the top 8 of this Modern Open.
And there's probably an outside chance that Bob makes the top 8 even if he loses.
That is true. Looks like he had... Bob's tiebreakers are fairly low.
Oh, okay.
Just barely over 60%.
So it looks like Ming is kind of out of gas, so he's going to likely animate one of these creatures and just try to push as much damage as he can.
Yeah, looks like that's what he's doing. He's going to attack in for 10. Bob's going to go ahead and Nourishing Shoal. Going to gain, I believe it's 11 from the World Spine Worm.
And man, even if Bob had something like a Berborgamos, oh well, there's the Griselbrand, but he can't gain life and draw cards.
Well, he can just attack, gain 7.
He's going to be able to get 1 draw 7, but he's got to hit a fatty off of that.
Yeah, he needs to hit another World Spine Worm off of that first draw 7.
So this is a little bit of a sweat for Bob. I mean, he's got to, figure out the most efficient way to do this to give himself the most outs. But basically, it looks like he's going to be trying to get.
Now, even if he is able to put this Griselbrand onto the battlefield, since he can't utilize a draw 7 now, if Ming Wen happens to have a Path to Exile in his hand over the last couple of turns that he's drawn, it could just be over.
Yeah, that's probably what Bob is thinking about. I think ultimately he's going to be priced into just putting this Griselbrand into play, attacking with it, gaining 7 life, drawing 7 cards, hoping to hit a fatty so that he can Nourishing Shoal it, and then continue to draw 7 and to keep going.
It looks like Ming only has 1 card in his hand, which is the Damnation that we know about. So Bob is going to be able to gain 7 here, and we have to try and go for the win. He needs to find either a World Spine Worm or another Nourishing Shoal would allow him to gain 2 life and go up to 8, and then draw 7 and go back down to 1.
Yeah, it looks like he's got a Griselbrand, which is also gonna. Oh wait, no, the Nourishing Shoal requires a green creature, correct?
Yeah, a green card, I believe. So it looks like he can Nourishing Shoal a Nourishing Shoal to go up to 8, which will allow him to draw another 7, which means he would have to hit his last Nourishing Shoal and a World Spine Worm.
Yeah, definitely a tricky scenario. Looks like Bob's deck is kind of letting him down a little bit, but we'll see what he can do. Maybe he can pull things through.
I'd be interested to find out how Ming was able to take a game earlier in the match.
Well, this Goryo's Vengeance deck, it looks really good when it's doing its thing, but it's fairly inconsistent. I think the whole reason that Bob has recently incorporated blue is to just have more card draw so that he can help with the consistency. But I think that is basically the big pitfall of the deck.
And he found the Nourishing Shoal and the World Spine Worm off of that last 7. So now he doesn't have any more Nourishing Shoals in his deck. That is the last one. So he is only going to get 7 more cards here.
He's also starting to run out of cards in his library.
He also could just not draw off of this Griselbrand and recombo Borborygmos next turn.
Yeah, he has the Goryo's Vengeance in his hand, so that is certainly going to be something that he can do. He's a little tight on mana here, so he may want to just wait another turn.
So if he draws 7 here, be interested to see how many cards are left in his library. Looks like he's going to be counting out a 7-card hand.
Yeah. So if Ming draws a blank and can't kill Bob or provide some other serious form of disruption, I assume that Bob is going to be able to leave himself in a position where he's going to be able to Goryo's Vengeance, get a Griselbrand into play, attack with it, draw another 7, and have a good chance of comboing off, especially because he's going to have
more mana.
A lot more mana on the following turn.
Man, this Goryo's Vengeance deck is crazy.
Yeah, it is, and it's really, really tricky to play. Again, it's a deck similar to the Amulet Titan deck, where it just doesn't play like a normal Magic deck. So if you haven't played it before, it's really, really hard to get into. For the people that have decided to learn this deck, I think it can be quite rewarding, but it is tricky.
So it looks like Bob is lining up the perfect 7 here. He's more than likely going to get rid of the rest. His Griselbrand is going to go away. And then on Ming's turn, he's going to be able to attack in, let's see here, it looks like for another 10 points of damage, but that will still leave Bob at 2.
Yeah, and Bob has 2 Goryo's Vengeances in hand, so even if Ming draws a single discard spell, it probably won't be enough to really break up what Bob's doing. Now, one thing that may also be a little interesting is there's a slight chance that Ming's life total is actually an issue, and it'll be interesting to see if Ming tries to attack with the Shambling Vent just to gain a little extra life. It would be pretty marginal, and Ming would probably have to have a kind of a specific reason of doing it, but putting Bob down to 2 or 3 probably doesn't really make a difference.
Yeah, I imagine it's going to be the same, and it could be that he should have just done that last time.
Yeah.
So we're going to go ahead and pass the turn back to Ming. Bob has refilled his hand to a 7. He's going to try and win next turn, but Ming does get one more draw step. And let's see what he does here. It looks like he might activate that Strain Wildwood. He has a Damnation in hand.
Yeah, Bob is just praying that he can live to untap and do his thing.
So Ming is, again, looks like he's thinking about activating the Strain Wildwood. Now, both of these players are playing for top 8. Bob Huang is 12-2. Ming Wen is 11-2-1. The winner of this match will be in the top 8. If Bob Huang does happen to lose, he still has an outside shot at top 8, but from looking at the tiebreakers, more than likely he's going to be drawing dead at that point.
Yeah. I know I'm a little biased towards Bob. I know I've seen him brew some sweet stuff, and I really respect him as a deck builder, but Ming is certainly, you know, shown his stuff. He's made it really far, and I'd be happy if he got his top 8 too. I'd have to imagine it's his first. I've never heard of him before.
So it looks like Ming is just going through all the numbers, counting up how much damage he can do with each of the creature lands, trying to decide on which one he wants to fire up and send into the red zone.
This match is sort of featuring some of the reasons why I think this Goryo's Vengeance deck isn't more popular. These Abzan decks are probably one of the best matchups for Goryo's Vengeance because the Abzan deck isn't really equipped to fight it, and Bob is still in a situation where he could potentially lose. And he didn't miss land drops. He basically drew cards and cycled through his deck and did what he wanted to do, and he's still, you know, having a hard time because this deck isn't quite the most consistent thing in the world.
So it looks like he did get an extra turn. Ming wasn't able to kill him. He did fire up that Stirring Wildwood and put everything into the red zone. This brings Bob down to 2, but he does have 8 cards in his hand, a full graveyard, and presumably a few different ways that he can actually win this game. Looks like he's going to fetch down to 1. Hopefully he has an untapped land to find.
Yeah,
he might even just be looking at his deck and shuffle those Borborygmos back in.
Yeah, he knew that they were on the bottom because he had scryed them both to the bottom with the Serum Visions earlier and hadn't cracked a fetch land since. So this fetch land is actually pretty good because it's going to give Bob a chance to shuffle them around and hopefully draw them off of just one activation of Griselbrand. And it doesn't look like there's that many lands in the deck. The other half of the combo is essentially putting Borborygmos into play and then discarding lands to finish your opponent off.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure...
Well, a Griselbrand attack is going to put Ming to 4, which is going to be 2 activations of Borborygmos, which I imagine is why he didn't attack with that Shambling Vent, since it still would be 2 activations of Borborygmos. So it looks like Bob does have at least 1 land in his hand that he's going to be able to use if he gets this Borborygmos onto the battlefield. So we've got a Faithless Looting, and he did draw into the Borborygmos, and so that might just end up being game with the...
Yeah, now he just needs to Goryo's Vengeance, Griselbrand into play, attack, draw 7, and off that 7 that he draws, he has to hit 2 lands, otherwise he won't be able to finish things off.
Well, he does have 1 land in hand already, so he just has to hit 1 more land.
Does he? I thought he...
Yeah, there's a Polluted Delta in hand.
That's not the land he played this turn and
No.
cracked? Okay.
So he's going to Vengeance. Oh, he's just going to Vengeance Borborygmos. Oh, and then he's going to Spirit Guide, Vengeance, and Griselbrand, and
Who
that
needs
is
lands?
probably going to be lethal.
Wow. Good job, Bob Huang. Really
Man.
impressive.
So he's able to shuffle the Borborygmos back into his deck with that fetch land, found one off of his Faithless Looting, and Goryo's Vengeance, 2 giant legendary monsters onto the battlefield, send them towards Ming Wen, and
that was a nail biter for Bob. I mean,
don't
you saw
know.
when we could hear it all the way across the room when he gave his holler. He
Yeah.
was just excited to win that game. That was a nail biter.
that was quite the wrecking when he came in.
It was quite